A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Chapter 21. The Pilgrims. When I did get to bed at last, I was unspeakably tired. The stretching out and the relaxing of the long, tense muscles, how luxurious, how delicious. But that was as far as I could get. Sleep was out of the question for the present. The ripping and tearing and squealing of the nobility up and down the halls and corridors was pandemonium come again, and kept me broad awake. Being awake, my thoughts were busy, of course, and mainly they busied themselves with Sandy's curious delusion. Here she was, as sane a person as the kingdom could produce, and yet, from my point of view, she was acting like a crazy woman. My land, the power of training, of influence, of education, it can bring a body up to believe anything. I had to put myself in Sandy's place to realize that she was not a lunatic. Yes, and put her in mind to demonstrate how easy it is to seem a lunatic to a person who has not been taught as you have been taught. If I had told Sandy I had seen a wagon, uninfluenced by enchantment, spin along 50 miles an hour, had seen a man unequipped with magic powers get into a basket and soar out of sight among the clouds, and had listened, without any necromancer's help, to the conversation of a person who was several hundred miles away, Sandy would not merely have supposed me to be crazy, she would have thought she knew it. Everybody around her believed in enchantments. Nobody had any doubts. The doubt that a castle could be turned into a sty, and its occupants into hogs, would have been the same as my doubting among Connecticut people the actuality of the telephone and its wonders, and in both cases would be absolute proof of a diseased mind and unsettled reason. Yes, Sandy was sane, that must be admitted. If I also would be sane to Sandy, I must keep my superstitions about unenchanted and unmiraculous locomotives, balloons, and telephones to myself. Also, I believed that the world was not flat, and hadn't pillars under it to support it, nor canopy over it to turn off a universal water that occupied all space above. But as I was the only person in the kingdom afflicted with such impious and criminal opinions, I recognized that it would be good wisdom to keep quiet about this matter, too, if I did not wish to be suddenly shunned and forsaken by everybody as a madman. The next morning, Sandy assembled the swine in the dining room and gave them their breakfast, waiting upon them personally and manifesting in every way the deep reverence which the natives of her island, ancient and modern, have always felt for rank, let its outward casket and the mental and moral contents be what they may. I could have eaten with the hogs if I had had birth approaching my lofty official rank, but I hadn't, and so accepted the unavoidable slight and made no complaint. Sandy and I had our breakfast at the second table. The family were not at home. I said, "How many are in the family, Sandy, and where do they keep themselves?" "Family?" "Yes." "Which family, good my lord?" "Why, this family, your own family." "Sooth to say, I understand you not. I have no family." "No family? Why, Sandy, isn't this your home?" "Now, how indeed might that be? I have no home." "Well, then, whose house is this?" "Wit you well, I would tell you, and I knew myself." "Come, you don't even know these people?" "Then who invited us here?" "None invited us. We but came, that is all." "Why, woman, this is a most extraordinary performance. The effrontery of it is beyond admiration. We blandly march into a man's house and cram it full of the only really valuable nobility the sun has yet discovered in the earth, and then it turns out that we don't even know the man's name. How did you ever venture to take this extravagant liberty? I supposed, of course, it was your home. What will the man say? What will he say? Forsooth, what can he say but give thanks? Thanks for what? Her face was filled with a puzzled surprise. Verily, thou troublest mine understanding with strange words. Do ye dream that one of his estate is like to have the honour twice in his life to entertain company such as we have brought to grace his house withal? Well, no, when you come to that. No, it's an even bet that this is the first time he has had a treat like this. Then let him be thankful, and manifest the same by grateful speech and due humility. He were a dog else, and the heir and ancestor of dogs. To my mind, the situation was uncomfortable. It might become more so. It might be a good idea to muster the hogs and move on. So I said, the day is wasting, Sandy. It is time to get the nobility together and be moving. Wherefore, fair sir and boss? We want to take them to their home, don't we? La, but listen to him. They be of all the regions of the earth. Each must hie to her own home. When you we might do all these journeys in one so brief life as he hath appointed that created life, and thereto death likewise with help of Adam, who by sin done through the persuasion of his helpmeet, she being wrought upon and bewrayed by the beguilements of the great enemy of man, the serpent hight Satan, aforetime consecrated and set apart unto that evil work by overmastering spite and envy begotten in his heart through fail ambitions that did blight and mildew a nature earth so wide and pure, when so it hove with the shining multitudes its brethren born in glade and shade of that fair heaven, wherein all such as native be to that rich state. Great Scott! My lord? Well, you know we haven't got time for this sort of thing. Don't you see, we could distribute these people around the earth in less time than it is going to take you to explain that we can. We mustn't talk now, we must act. You want to be careful. You mustn't let your mill get the start of you that way at a time like this. To business now, and sharp's the word. Who is to take the aristocracy home? Even their friends. These will come for them from the far parts of the earth. This was lightning from a clear sky for unexpectedness, and the relief of it was like pardon to a prisoner. She would remain to deliver the goods, of course. Well then, Sandy, as our enterprise is handsomely and successfully ended, I will go home and report, and if ever another one, I also am ready. I will go with thee. This was recalling the pardon. How? You will go with me? Why should you? Will I be traitor to my knight, dost think? That were dishonour. I may not part from thee until a nightly encounter in the field some overmatching champion shall fairly win and fairly wear me. I were to blame, and I thought that might ever happen. Elected for the long term, I sighed to myself. I may as well make the best of it. So then I spoke up and said, all right, let us make a start. While she was gone to cry her farewells over the pork, I gave that whole peerage away to the servants, and I asked them to take a duster and dust around a little where the nobilities had mainly lodged and promenaded, but they considered that would be hardly worth while, and would moreover be a rather grave departure from custom, and therefore likely to make talk. A departure from custom, that settled it. It was a nation capable of committing any crime but that. The servants said they would follow the fashion grown sacred through immemorial observance. They would scatter fresh rushes in all the rooms and halls, and then the evidence of the aristocratic visitation would no longer be visible. It was a kind of satire on nature. It was the scientific method, the geologic method. It deposited the history of the family in a stratified record, and the antiquary could dig through it and tell by the remains of each period what changes of diet the family had introduced successfully for 100 years. The first thing we struck that day was a procession of pilgrims. It was not going our way, but we joined it nonetheless. For it was hourly being borne in upon me now that if I would govern this country wisely, I must be posted in the details of its life, and not at second hand, but by personal observation and scrutiny. This company of pilgrims resembled Chaucer's in this, that it had in it a sample of about all the upper occupations and professions in the country could show, and a corresponding variety of costume. There were young men and old men, young women and old women, lively folk and grave folk. They rode upon mules and horses, and there was not a side saddle in the party. But this specialty was to remain unknown in England for 900 years yet.